certain syntax in the HTML code, for example, which is non-standard. And it, for example, also uses TypeScript, as I mentioned before. So you need to write TypeScript code, which isn't difficult, as you'll see. You don't need to know it in order to take this course, but it doesn't work in the browser out of the box. It needs to be converted to JavaScript. And for all these reasons, since these things don't work out of the box like that in the browser, you need to create an Angular project that comes with certain tools that translate that code, that compile that code to code that does run in the browser. And along the way, it also would be nice if that code would then also be optimized. And that's why the Angular team created the Angular CLI, the Angular command line interface, which is a tool that simplifies the process of creating Angular projects, but which is also a tool that's then in the end used behind the scenes by those projects whenever you run your development testing server or when you build your app for production to perform those mentioned compilations and optimizations. So it's a crucial tool you'll work with all the time as an Angular developer, though most of the time you'll just use it behind the scenes automatically. Nonetheless, you need to install it in order to create Angular projects and in order to work on those projects. Now, attached, you find a link to this Angular CLI page, and there in the local setup area, you learn how to install the Angular CLI and how to then use it, though I'll show you the crucial basic usage you'll need for this course and for most Angular projects in this course, of course. We'll also dive a bit deeper into the Angular CLI and what you can do with it in later sections. To get started and create an Angular project, you, as a first step, need to install the CLI with help of this command. And for this command to work, you actually need to install another tool. Write any Node.js code in this course. Angular is not a Node.js framework. It's a browser-side framework in the end. But the Angular CLI actually needs Node.js in order to work, and you also need NPM, the package manager that comes together with Node.js. You should visit nodejs.org, and from there, download the LTS version, whichever version that might be at the point of time you're viewing this. And once you did download it, go through its installer, and here I'm using macOS, but it will automatically download the right installer for the operating system you're using. Of course, you can follow along on Windows as well. It's not a macOS only tool, and Angular also works on all operating systems. So walk through that installer and basically confirm all those defaults. And once you then completed that installation, you'll then have Node.js and also this NPM tool installed on your system. And with that, you're then ready to execute this command and install the Angular CLI. So that's what I'll do next. I'll copy this command. And then with that command copied, you should open the default system terminal or command prompt on Windows and execute that command there, though on Mac OS and Linux, you might need to add sudo in front of this command to give it the right permissions. And you might be prompted for your password. On Windows, sudo is not needed and won't work there. So that will now install this Angular CLI, this command line interface, globally on our system. And with it installed, you're now ready to finally create a new Angular project. For that, you should navigate in your terminal or command prompt into the folder where you want to create that Angular project. And once you're there, you can create that project by running the ng new command. This ng command here is now available with the Angular CLI installed. And the new command is then a command supported by the ng command in the end to create a new Angular project. You now also need to give that project a name, for example, first-angular-app. And the name can be anything you like, but you should not include white space into that name. And it's also a good convention to keep it all lowercase and simply separate different words with dashes, as you see it here. You can then hit enter and you'll get asked a couple of questions. For example, which style sheet format you'd like to use. So if you want to use plain CSS for styling, or Sass, or SCSS, and here I'll go for the plain CSS option. You might also get asked if you want to enable server-side rendering and static site generation. And it doesn't matter too much what you choose here, but here I'll actually enter N for no here. We'll dive into server-side rendering and what that is later in the course, but for the moment I'll pick no. And that will then go ahead and create this project. You might get asked more questions because those change from time to time, but in that case, you can always confirm the default choice by simply hitting enter. And ultimately, this new project should therefore be created.